Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here today for some tips and tricks for gardening. Some things I've learned along the way, just my own personal experience. And this is especially for those newbies to gardening who are just getting started this year, but also if you've been gardening for years and you're just looking for a new, maybe even easier way to do some certain things. And while we're in this brief reprieve between our heavy winter rains and our heavy spring rains, I thought I would shoot this outside so I can get some fresh air as much as possible. So let's start off talking a little bit about how you want to prepare your garden. There's many ways to do it. Some are much easier and less expensive than others, but the problem with some of the very easy methods of getting your garden started is that it can take time. So if you're looking into doing the lasagna gardening or back to Eden garden, it's best to start it a year ahead of time, or at least in the fall, so that your garden has all winter to sit in the paper and the whatever else you're laying down has time to break down. So now is too late to start that for this year. Now the fastest and easiest way to get started, if you have the funds and or the skills, would be to put in some raised beds. This is going to be the best all the way around, especially if you're older or you're kind of looking at getting older and you're thinking, man, I don't want to be bending down all the time. Raised beds are excellent because you can either build some frames or have somebody build them for you, and then get them to the height that you want to work those gardens, and then get some soil and put it in there. Again, that's going to be something that's probably going to cost more to get started because you're going to have to purchase the soil and some good enriched soil, and the time and labor and supplies that go into building the beds themselves. And then there's the option of just starting fresh and tilling up your own soil. But of course you have to have a rototiller. So if you don't have a rototiller, and you don't have the funds to buy one, that can be a little bit difficult to do. It's a good way to get started if you can do it, or even borrow a tiller from a friend, or maybe a family member or friend. You can barter with them to have them come till it up for you if they have one. When I first started gardening in the outside areas outside of my greenhouse, because the greenhouse was our first thing that we did many years ago, back when our boys were little bitty. And that was mostly for the sake of me just wanting to grow good tomatoes, because we just never get good tomatoes in our local store. And we live in an area where tomatoes don't grow great outdoors, so you really are going to do best by having your own greenhouse for those. So that's why we started it. But during the time when I thought I want to get serious about putting more things in the ground and gardening, Patrick was just constantly swamped at work. He was, and he would have to commute 45 minutes each way to work and back, and often put in a lot of overtime because of the type of job he had. Being, essential is what he was. So it was really kind of up to me, and I didn't want to put that burden on him. And we didn't have a rototiller back then, and he didn't have time to build boxes. And actually, I don't think I even knew anything about raised beds. So I just took a hoe that we had on hand and started hoeing up the ground by hand. Yes, I did that. And yes, it can be done. I removed the layers of sod, got rid of those, and then just worked the soil underneath the sod, and that's how I got my garden going. And I didn't amend the soil. I just started planting it in it right away because I didn't want to wait. And believe it or not, I did have quite a few things that did very, very well for me. And one of those was snow peas. Especially if you live in a cooler climate like we do, snow peas will grow quick and excellent, and they're one of the first things that you can usually plant, and they will do well for you. And potatoes are another thing. I know I've said this before, but potatoes are another thing that will grow in just about any climate and in almost any soil. One of the first places I put the potatoes at the time, because it was the only place I had, was right up against our north side of our house, because there was a bare patch there I could use. There was already dirt there from some shrubbery that we had taken out, so I just stuck the potatoes in there. That's all I did, nothing special. And even though that area got no sun at all, no direct sun during the day, and the soil was kind of heavy and not amended, the potatoes did great. I got some good sized potatoes out of that. So the point is, you can start with whatever you have. Even if some of your stuff fails, it's not a waste, because now you've learned something new. Never look at failures as a waste of time. because a lot of times the seeds themselves don't cost that much money, and if it costs you $3.50 or $4 or $2, whatever your seeds cost, just to find out, well, that didn't work well here or the way I planted it, then that's a much cheaper education than it would take to go to school. So really the best education you get when it comes to gardening is doing. You learn best by doing. You get the experience. That's how I did it. I had sometimes I would look certain things up online, but a lot of times I would just do, because what I knew is that most of the information I was getting online were people with what some of us would consider more normal growing climates, where we get 120 inches of rain annually average, and we can get as much as 160 inches of rain. In fact, a few months ago we got as much as 30 inches just in 1 month. It was over that actually. So 3 times what Seattle was getting that same month. So I had to learn by experience to find out what would work best for our area as well. So for me, by doing that instead of just reading stuff, that was a better educator for me. Not saying that it's not a good idea to read and learn and watch other people's videos. If you live in the Deep South, then watch Deep South Homestead's videos on gardening. If you live in the North, those gardening videos, you might get a lot of great information from them because they're great people with a lot of knowledge on gardening, but a lot of what they do won't work for us like it does for them because of our area. So I know a lot of my friends out here in the Pacific Northwest really appreciate my videos because they understand the rain and the wet, especially where we're at, because we're right next door to the rainforest. So another thing to look into is companion planting. This is something that's a good idea to look into. Look at the things that grow best together, but don't limit yourself to just that either, because here's the thing. A lot of times there's these do's and don'ts. Don't do this, and never ever do that. But sometimes you can find, just by doing something for yourself, even if it's just an experiment, that maybe it will work for you. Now we have limited space because we're on a corner lot in a neighborhood, and we have a shy 1/3 acre. We were thinking it was a 1/3 acre, but when we got to looking, it's actually a shy 1/3 acre. And we're doing all we can right here in our little spot. But how we do that is learning how to be creative with what we have. So container gardening is a big thing. And I do have a video on container gardening. I believe it might be a couple years old. I will make sure to link down below in the description box that you can check out. Like you can see behind me, of course, everything's just started getting started. I've got blueberries here. They're just getting their little buds, getting ready to open up. And then the grapevines here growing on the beam that goes around our deck behind me. And then by midsummer, late summer, this will be just green. You won't even be able to see the greenhouse on the other side. This will just be filled in with foliage, and it's beautiful. I love it. But anyway, these blueberries have been growing in these pots for what, 6-7 years maybe? And we get a good amount of blueberries off of them every single year. But with that, a lot of times what I'll do is, when my son, he likes to buy green onions and then give me the little white ends, and I take them and I'll put them in pots here and there. And one time, I wasn't even thinking, I had a peach tree that in a pot out here in this section. It was one of the ones that we moved out front, and I had beans planted around that peach tree. And here is what that looked like, the scarlet and sunset runner beans growing up that peach tree. Well, in that same pot, I had some more onions, didn't know where to put them, stuck in that pot, and forgot about the fact that you're not supposed to grow beans and onions together. Well, guess what? Those green onions got massive. They were the most beautiful green onions I've ever grown, and my beans did great too. So you can't always go by the solid do's and don'ts that are out there. And then the other thing I want to add here, I've got a couple more interesting tips I'm going to add, but one more thing I want to say is, when you start doing your garden, I normally tell people start small, but because of the way things are right now, I mean, we are seeing shortages, and this isn't just because people are panic buying. It's because the stores are not getting in all of their shipments that they order. And what, you know, even if it's just their normal shipments, the normal amount they would order, they might only be getting 1/4 or less of what they ordered because they're not being allowed to get any more. And I'm not sure why. Maybe the shortages are coming from somewhere else, but stop blaming all the panic buyers for that, because they're just trying to do what they can to look out for their family and themselves. And really, the stores are limited with what they're getting in. And I know this for a fact. So my son does the ordering at our local store. He's an assistant manager. And so We know this. So I do recommend, because of that, you try to get as much going as you can. Expect failures though. Some things will probably do great for you right from the start. Maybe you plant 15 different types of crops, and maybe only 3 of those really produce for you. It's still something. And the other ones, the other 12, well, you still learned something while you were at it. But the reason I usually tell people to start small is it can be overwhelming if you start too much at once. But at the same time, I just see the need for everybody to do as much as they can to start, but also approach it with the attitude that if it fails, it fails. At least I learned something. And even if you only got 1 of something, it's better than nothing at all. Just stay realistic about it. Don't expect to have a huge lush garden in the first year. It's not likely to happen because there's so much to learn about it. And that's why you don't want to wait to get into gardening, or you can't, some people kind of have this idea that, okay, well, I'll save seeds because I don't want to garden right now and I'll wait till things get bad. Well, it's not that easy. It takes time to learn and to build your garden and build your soil. So each year that I gardened, I learned how to add more to my soil and add more to my soil and what's going to grow best where, and move things around and plant this here and there. And each year it gets a little better as a result. And I'm still learning with each year what can grow best where, and learning how to make more space or more use of the space that I currently have. Now for a couple of tips that might be a little different than what others might tell you. Let's talk a little bit about composting. We have never had a compost pile. We don't have a compost bin. We just don't really have the space for one. And if we consider to make space for one, I still don't even know where I'd want to put it. So here's how we compost our kitchen scraps. We just throw them directly onto the garden all year round. And some things will differ depending on what they are. A lot of things go directly into the pots. Like right here, all the blueberry pots, my strawberry pots on the front deck, that's where I put our coffee grounds, because coffee grounds are really good for your berries. Strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, any of these kind of berries. Coffee grounds are good for other things too, but because these are always easy to get to because they're right on my deck, I just throw our coffee grounds in there. I'll just throw it in a different pot every morning. And then like banana peels, we'll throw them anywhere. Banana peels break down quickly. Orange, citrus peels are a little more tricky. I usually use those to make vinegar with anyway, and the process of making vinegar actually breaks them down and softens them quite a bit. So then I can just throw them just about anywhere in my garden, and they're going to break, since they're already pretty well broken down, they're going to break down a lot faster in compost. And even while the garden's growing, we still do this. We just throw the stuff out there. And if it's in a place where, like say it's out front, or a place we don't want it to be visible because it kind of detracts from the beauty of the garden, then I find plants to put it under that have nice big leaves that will kind of hide that, but it will still feed the plant. So we don't even have to worry about tilling it in until we're ready to till that one time of the year, which we don't usually till every year. We have the past couple of years just because some changes and stuff we've made in our gardens and working up new areas, but a lot of years I don't till at all. We just layer. We just throw some shavings from the shop. We'll throw leaves in the fall. We'll layer those down on all the garden beds, getting those from our neighbors all around us, since we don't really have any trees anymore that make that much leaves. And then when we're able to, we get some horse manure from up the road. Look around, you may find a lot of people that are trying to get rid of their horse manure, whatever it is. So just look around. You can find cheap and easy ways. Grass clippings are another great thing. Now, grass clippings, especially now that we have that other piece of property, we can mow that, get a whole bunch of grass clippings, bring them back to the house, and I'll throw those on top of my potatoes, especially. Potatoes love those grass clippings. Anything acidic is going to love the grass clippings. You don't want to put your grass clippings on young plants, but on the potatoes, you can on the potatoes no matter how young they are. And your corn, I'd wait till the corn is a little taller so that you don't cover your plants up with the clippings, but put it all around the base. Again, it's going to prevent moisture loss from your soil, so you don't have to water as much, and it's really going to feed that corn and those potatoes and anything else, like your blackberries, your blueberries love grass clippings, strawberries, anything like that. And then for the rest of your garden, the grass clippings will do good too, as long as your plants are mature enough to throw them around there. Again, you don't want to put your grass clippings on young plants, especially if they're ones that like a sweeter soil. Wait until the plants are a little older and don't put too heavy of a layer, just enough to help keep the ground from drying out. Other things that you can do is some of the things that maybe if you're growing borage like I do, borage or comfrey, that's another one. You could do chop and drop. Chop these things and then just put the leaves, you know, they'll get big and sometimes they get a little too big. Just chop them down and chop them up. Get yourself a machete and just throw that all around your different plants. That can go around any plant, and that will just really add a lot of goodness to the soil, as well as putting that nice layer on top. So those are some cheap, free, easy ways that you can really start amending your soil, adding to your soil, and protecting your plants and feeding them. So another thing, this is might sound kind of funny to some people, but another little tip is I personally love crows. Long before we had a garden or even chickens, I was always feeding the crows because I love them. And crows are very, very smart. And you will have the same crows that will come back. And I have crows that come here every morning because they know every morning I'll bring them a treat. We have this beam up here that our grapes grow around. Well, right now I don't have, you know, because the grapes are all pruned up and they haven't started taking off yet. There's a bare spot up there where I'm putting their little treats in the morning, and they know to come wait for them. And the funny thing about that is I have never once in all my time of gardening have ever had crows do anything destructive to my gardens. Never. And I'm thinking it's because of the fact that crows are smart. They will remember you. There's even stories about crows bringing gifts to people when they leave them treats like that. And I'm just thinking that it's like, well, I leave them treats, they leave my garden alone. I don't need a scarecrow because we have this kind of great relationship here. So I'll feed the chickens. I might even throw a little bit of the chicken feed up on there for the crows. Sometimes it's some leftover rice or some leftover bread, you know, biscuits or whatever it is, a little bit of meat. They love all that stuff. And it might seem silly, but you know what? It works. And I've never had issues with crows. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.